All right, cool. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. So here's the agenda for today. We'll kind of, oops, I did that last week. Do general introductions, and then Mika and Joe will do kind of personal introductions, and then discuss each of their works, and then closing remarks. And so for those of you that weren't here last week, board members Susan and Larry worked in collaboration with the Nantes and the artists of local tribes to stage an outdoor art exhibit at the Musée d'Histoire Naturelle de Nantes. And so that's an outdoor exhibit that's happening. And today is the opening day, I guess, of the indoor, of the museum's actually going to be open indoors.
Oh, wow.
And so presentation norms, we're a very small group, so it's pretty fine, but just in general, if you're not talking, it's often helpful if you mute. That way it prevents any background verbiage happening. And then also, just so if you're not familiar with Zoom, there's an option to look at the like the active speaker, and it should look something like this, a large blue box or something like that. And that makes the screen larger for the person that's talking, opposed to like a grid system. So you can view the meeting however you desire, but sometimes that is helpful. And then some awesome resources in terms of Washington tribes. Larry had found this the other week, and I'm going to go to the actual PDF of it, and it goes through. So like we can see here, over here, we have like the Makah and the Sequin. And then down at the bottom is where you have kind of a description of each of the tribes and a link to their website. Also, a great website that Canada put together, looking at nativeland.ca. But it goes through, and its important part is looking at the overlap of tribal lands, which is, and tribal waters, which definitely from a European understanding of land is not these concrete lines, but this overlapping of shared territory amongst tribal land, the tribes that share those lands. And it's also really interesting looking at, definitely, you can look at different treaties as well as languages. So it's a fun website to explore. And now we can go through some introductions. I will stop sharing, and if Mika, you would like to kind of give a little background.
Should I go, I guess?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so. Okay, Joe. So yeah, I saw that slide. That was a picture that was taken when I was working with the Washington State Arts Commission. And I think I did 2 fellowships. I did one Master Arts Fellowship, which just kind of funded me as an emerging Master Artist. And then I did another fellowship for an apprenticeship. So I think that picture I was working on bird sculpture, and that was leading into the first fellowship I ended up getting with the Arts Commission. But for myself, I'm Micah McCarty. I'm former chairman of the Makah tribe. One of my PowerPoints I'd like to share based on Joe's good idea to have a little bit of slideshow to get more of the work introduced. That slideshow that I have really, I think it's indicative of the blending of worlds of what I worked on as a full-time artist that eventually was asked to run for council, and I served 9 years in tribal council, and I did a lot of multidisciplinary senior policy work, and you'll see that in the slideshow. And so I guess the emphasis that I'd like to bring, as far as my introduction, is that I'm a creative problem solver with public policy, and I've always been an artist and creative at heart, and real big on tribal sovereignty and respect of all cultures. I believe that the natural world is dependent on the remaining cultures that still live with the natural world. It's that symbiotic relationship is the habitat of our cultures, is who we are and where we come from. In a nutshell, that's what I'd like to share.
Great, thank you very much. All right. And Joe, you can take it away.
Yeah, Ocha, Wahaletsu Titsta, Squaxin Island, Pueblo of Acoma Chas, Palau Ste Chas, welcome. My name is Wahaletsu, is my ancestral name. I come from Squaxin Island and the Pueblo of Acoma, and I currently live in my ancestral homelands of Olympia, Washington, which was traditionally known as Stechas, Place of the Bears. I've been a professional artist since 2006. I've participated in 4 international artist gatherings in Hawaii and New Zealand. I graduated from the Evergreen State College here in Olympia. Worked closely with the Longhouse at Evergreen. I was an in-house artist for residency there for 2 quarters. And my style of art is Salish, which is the style associated with Puget Sound and the southern Salish Sea. We have influences from the coast of Washington, from Columbia River, and from the interior passage of Vancouver Island and the mainland British Columbia. All the work I've studied has been, other Coast Salish artists and Coast Salish artifacts. I wasn't raised as with an artistic family, with an artistic background. So I've done a lot of study of outside family works, but I have cousins that are, have studied Coast Salish and know the story. So I've worked with them. And that's about my art.
Lovely, thank you very much. Makah, I have 2 slides showing, I think, the art that you had. These are the ones that were on display in Nantes. I'm not sure if you want to speak specifically on these and then go into your slide or whatever works for you, Makah.
Yeah, Micah, I can.
Micah, sorry.
I can speak to that first one. So the hummingbird in flower really was a prototype of a tattoo design that I was commissioned to do for the executive director of the Red Wind Casino. So she been going through some trials and tribulations, and also leading into the pandemic, she felt a need to reach out, I think, in 2 ways. One, she wanted to celebrate Native culture in some body art, and she told me that she liked the hummingbird and flower concept for a tattoo. And also she knew, because of the emerging pandemic, that artists may be suffering with lack of sales, because art is a luxury, not a necessity. So she actually commissioned a series of designs just to help put money in my pocket and feed my family. So that was really the emphasis kind of behind this one. And with this piece, I really wanted to show the relationship that hummingbirds have with flowers and the nectars. And so I really focused on a design that, that just kind of shows the care in that, that relationship, that the hummingbird isn't just taking advantage of the flower, but it actually cares for it. And that's kind of how I did the design, where, it's almost like the hummingbird is hugging the flower. And then the next one, I knew, based on a little bit of research about the sister city relationship with Nantes, and I'd been doing a series of female shaman masks, and a lot of them have been really focused on various elements within our natural world. And so I've done a couple of female shaman masks around water and water spirit. And so I know that, you know, Nantes has a connection to water like Seattle, and, you know, there's a river, you know, further downstream, you can get out into the ocean. And so water spirit, I felt, was sort of a natural fit because of the, you know, the natural commonalities between Seattle and Nantes. And so this is a female water spirit image that I did, and actually it's been commissioned. And so I'm doing another one of these. And so it's a wall hanging. It's pretty large. It's a piece that I put together with some wood that I actually traded with a guy that supplies drums. So I know Joe probably knows the guys down there at Centralia Fur and Hide, but the guy, long time ago, he had a bunch of cedar milled up and he was going to make drum hoops out of them. And he decided, after getting involved with it, it was too much work and not enough return. It'd be easier to just commission somebody else to make the hoops. And so he had all this veneer wood laying around for years, and I cut a deal with him over Christmas this last season. And so that's where this the panels, it's a bunch of real thin old growth veneer that I put over a plywood veneer and made a wall hanging. And so in our tradition, we have a blessing ceremony where we use eagle down, and sometimes in New Channel Makah work, we use sea sponges to make certain kinds of accents or highlights in our design work. And so in this piece, I have sort of like the third eye, the spirit, the intuition of that third eye in the top of the, yep, there you go. And then down below in the mouth, I have this similar design work, and that really symbolizes blowing the sacred breath, blessing what water spirit does for us. And so then the sponge work is, you know, more of that, you know, that eagle down connotation, you know, that it's enveloped in a spiritual wellness type feeling. So that's what water spirit is here. It's a purification. It's good for our health. It's good for that relationship. So in a way, it's blowing a blessing on the relationship between Nantes and Seattle. And that's pretty much what I've got there.
Wonderful, thank you, Micah. Does anybody have questions before we have share the rest of his anything on those two pieces? You can just speak. There's a small enough group.
I didn't understand the sponges. I didn't get that about the sponges on the piece.
Okay, so sponge work is what we call it, but I use a sea sponge and I dab the white paint in the areas that I want to put the sponge work on. And
yeah, I'm guessing like it looks, or like around here on the border, correct?
Yeah, so the method I use to get the paint in that, you know, around that rim is dabbing it with a sea sponge.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You said it was a large piece. How large is it?
It's,
Wow.
oh, yeah. So see that plywood over there in the back?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's approximately 5 inches in diameter, less than the width of that. So it's a pretty large piece. I actually have it in my living room.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Micah, if you would like, you can, I think you should be able to have the option to share your screen if you would like to.
Okay, how do I do that? Share screen?
It should be at the bottom. You'll see
Okay.
it says like participants, chat, and then share screen. Does it give you that option? Yep, perfect.
So that's where I'm at now.
Brilliant.
Okay.
You might need to, I think, yep, there you go.
And am I okay here? Or should I do the?
No, that's beautiful.
Okay. So as I was saying in my introduction, I spent actually better than 9 years, because I've done some senior policy consulting, and I was involved with the Makah Whaling Commission for a few years before I was asked to run for tribal council. And so there's a couple different things that inspired my work while I was serving in senior policy. That other slide that you had with the tribes was really interesting to me as well. But it's important for me to distinguish that Makah, we are the only new channel within the United States. We were, separated at this border through the Treaty of Paris that was consecrated after the treaties, the Stevens treaties. And my Indian name, which is Ha'oshiautuk, was bequeathed to me at my dad's funeral. But that name comes through his grandparents' marriage from a place, Ditidad, right here. But the mouth of Ditidad is there's a river that comes out, and there's a big lake in there. You can't really see it on the slide. But I also found out that my great-grandfather, his name was Hishkup Sonakshi, and that name translates to he makes the whale blow on the beach. And I did a canoe project with some friends at Tlaquet, and actually went and did some traditional trade with them up here in those mountains, and we brought out really large, tight, old-growth cedar, really slow-growing cedar. Some of the best wood I've ever seen was up in this area. But my friends with the Martin family, Joe Martin is actually one of the only really prolific dugout canoe carvers. I've studied under him various times, and I'm one of the only living Makahs now that have actually carved a dugout canoe. And I got my wood from the Martins, which I actually found out that we're related. Martin family also carries the Hishkup Sonakshi name. And so there's an ancient connection there where we share a name, and there must be, witnesses in our recent ancestry that were part of that ceremony. And so that's, on my father's side, that's who I am and where I come from in this area. Who we are and where we come from is really manifested in how we manage our territories, and how we manage our territories also translates to how much wealth we can share. In our tradition, the chief is generosity is measured, or the chief's wealth is measured by how much you can give away in potlatch. And so this picture is a piece I did that was inspired on hereditary households like the House of Wyatch. And what I have here is apex predators in a hunter-gathering society. For my understanding of some of the importance of our culture is that we have a strong fidelity to managing the ushering of spirits into the next world. When you take a life for whatever reason, for your, for food or for trade, you have to honor and respect that. And that's where I have a lot of the white in the designs in here. We have a story about the canoe, but one of my favorite legends is about the relationship between the wolves and the killer whales. The wolves and killer whales became so efficient in their hunting territories that there was no challenge left to the hunt, and they lost the thrill of the hunt. And so what they ended up doing is they made a treaty amongst each other that the wolves and the orcas would share territory so that they could take each other's form and have a new challenge to hunt. And so inside the canoe is the wolf, and outside here is the killer whale. And these are the transient orcas, not the ones that, like we see, that live in the Puget Sound. They eat fish. And then the Lightning Serpent and Thunderbird are iconic of, the zenith of our hunter-gathering society. And then this is the face of a whaler. And to close it, you can't see now, but when the canoe is closed, there's a killer whale wolf transformation design that's carved into the sides of the canoe. And can't see right here, but these whale effigies, one of them has a design that's carved to when you hunt a whale and you have the ceremony to usher the spirit into the next world, you cut the saddle piece off. That's what this design is indicating here. But this part of the whale is cut off. And so in this piece, when you open up the canoe face, you'll pull the whale with the saddle that's been cut. And this one is kind of inspired by a design that my brother Alex was doing based on his mom's work. And my dad and his mom spent time together working on this design. And the original ones that my stepmom did, my dad was actually posing in the different positions in the whaling canoe. So Joe, if you ever seen that print, that's my dad's physique. But so I didn't want to, I wanted to make the same kind of a design, but I didn't want to copy it, because that design that my brother's been doing and was the first harpoon strike. And so I called this one the third strike. And so you can see here, you have this person right here is holding the last sealskin float coming in. And the guy next to him is helping to bring in the line. And this guy right behind the killing lanceman is pulling the rope and pulling the canoe closer to the whale. The first strike is right here where that line is coming. And what I did with this design is I made the bloodlet into the shape of a new whale in here. And so this is kind of symbolic of the cycle of life in the whaling tradition, spiritual protection and guidance to keep the crew safe up here. The lightning serpent, it's been said that the Thunderbird uses lightning serpents to stun the whale before he would swoop down to harvest it, like a salmon gets taken out of the water by an eagle. And so that design was, really heavily inspired by several years of my involvement in the Makah Whaling Commission. That brought me to several places around the world where I learned, some of the international politics around whale conservation and whaling traditions. And so a lot of the emphasis behind these slides is, has really been, mostly centered around how Makah has been, for the most part, very successful in a lot of different senior policy, natural resource management arenas. Before the Bolt decision, which is a very huge, iconic, national impacting, treaty law, Northwest tribes have really kind of set a pretty high standard with government-to-government relationships with the federal government. Northwest tribes represent, very, very dynamic senior policy interactions with the government. And a lot of it is stemmed from how tribes built capacity after succeeding in the Bolt decision and building bureaucratic infrastructure around being co-managers and regulators of our own resources. And in 1959, the Makah successfully pioneered tribal representation with the International Halibut Commission by winning a lawsuit against National Marine Fisheries Service for working with Canadian and Alaskan counterparts to not allow Makahs to enjoy the halibut fishery like everybody else. And so the 59 case led to, Makah leadership among all the other leaders of the tribes in successfully negotiating the, what resulted in the Bolt decision. And then all the treaty tribes in Washington State participate on a coast-wide fisheries management forum. And this is, consistent with, Magnuson-Stevens Act, senior legislation, that helps to govern fisheries all up and down. And so what ended up, becoming, a co-management arena also led towards co-management of the environment to protect our treaty resources. And for a time, we were dealing with, and fighting to get to the table, as co-managers, our rightful places as resource trustees. So we had a fight on our hands just to get at the table. And then this whole coast also has another system of government that is also paying attention, and it's through National Ocean Service. The National Ocean Service is got the National Marine Sanctuary systems in there. And so there's some well-intended, but in some cases very extreme fisheries or marine life conservation community people. And the Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary, began to draw lines in different places and start calling them essential fish habitat without, fully documenting a biological profile. And so there was a lot of science that wasn't fully complete and not in consultation with the tribes and not in consultation with our understanding of the environment. And one of the things that was, a really strong driver for the impetus for me to help bridge a better relationship with the Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary was that there's certain rockfish species up and down this whole coast that are managed as threatened or endangered. And we knew through several years of fisheries data and observation that all of those rockfish species are in much higher abundance up in this area. And those same rockfish species that are being managed coastwide are much more scarce down here. And there's a large offshore fisheries out of Oregon that had an impact on this. And so we felt it was important to, insert ourselves into that conservation initiative and shed more light and bring what I consider to be traditional ecological knowledge with a more holistic perspective. And so in order to do so, the sanctuary has to have a signature of the governor in order to be designated. And we understood that because of the co-management relationship in US versus Washington in the Bolt decision, that the governor by law had to work with us as co-managers. But we didn't do it in a mean way. And so another area for environmental protection is 4 of the worst oil spills in Washington state history happened in our territory. And the agencies involved with the federal government and the state agencies had little to do with the tribe at the time. And so we had to again build our, our institutional infrastructure. And so we created the Office of Marine Affairs. And then we leveraged the treaty and environmental protections and co-management and partnership with the state to get to the table with the Coast Guard and do a memorandum of agreement, which is much stronger than an MOU. And so we pioneered the government-to-government relationship with the Coast Guard that previously never really had to deal with a treaty trust responsibility. That inspired some work that was brought into the senior policy arena. NITOM was commissioned to do this print on the commencement of the MOU signing. And the wolves here represent the protectors of our territory. This Thunderbird represents, the hereditary custodialship of our oceans and protection of our environment. This represents the U.S. Eagle. And so this is the Makah and Coast Guard coming together really at the direction and leadership of our hereditary whaling traditions. This is a Hereditary Chief with the whaler's hat. And so I also worked with Governor Christine Gregoire's Blue Ribbon panel on ocean acidification. A lot of the recommendations that I was a part of, the consultation and brainstorming of recommendations was put into this report. And this report actually manifested in funded programs at the University of Washington. They're actually ground truthing some of the assumptions that we brainstormed at the table. And as an artist, I think being a creative thinker and absorbing the interdisciplinary expertise in the room, I was able to, understand a lot of the vernacular that scientists were talking about and some of the senior policy folks, and really bridge some of those divisions in a way that brought better understanding at the table. We had a wave energy project and I actually have an idea of a wave energy buoy the shape of a whale. But when I'm doing these things, I'm also thinking of artistic creations, and not a whole lot about art. But so one of my friends did a dissertation on Makah marine spaces. This is I think a very interesting book. I think it'd also be interesting for the sister city relationship, because this book really goes into a time of historical contact. And when I read the dissertation, I was really proud about what I was reading for the first couple of chapters. But then as the colonialism damages, the collateral damage to our people became more and more constant, that it was kind of depressing in some ways. But as you see in the previous slides, coming back, reasserting our sovereignty, rebuilding all of those things, towards the end of the book, I was a lot happier. But in the beginning, I showed you this image. This is an image of a house. And when the newcomers came, they came on big wooden ships that in our minds resembled houses on water. So we called the newcomers Balbachlets. And in the book, there's a section in the book where it talks about three very powerful chiefs: Tatoosh here, Wickinnish from this area, and then Maquina from up in here. And those three chiefs, during the heyday of international trade among our chiefs and our great houses, those chiefs held a lot of sway and power. And then the storm came across our territories, and we have a tradition where you see these different territorial delineations of the different Nuu-chah-nulth tribes. Well, within those territories, hereditary chiefs have them divided up within the, like Pachidat or Makah. And the hereditary territory of a chief is called the Hautli. But when you think of all of the Hautli among all of the Nuu-chah-nulth, the collective is called the Chadi. So for Nuu-chah-nulth, the Chadi would be a sense of nationalism. If we were to call our national territory a word, it would be the Chadi. And so in the book cover, which I was asked to do the cover art, I have this image of houses on water, but it's also an image of the great houses of the Nuu-chah-nulth. And what happened to us was this great storm that came over the Chadi. And that's the symbolism here. And then this symbol is the symbol of a whaler's moon, which is supposed to be a good blessing. And it's a symbolic of higher wisdom that guides our great houses through the storm over the Chadi. And it's explained in the afterword that I wrote in the book. But one of my mentors, and a man I'm really proud to have worked closely with, especially when we launched the Treaty Rights at Risk initiative to force the federal government to become more consistent across the federal family regarding treaty rights. So historically, tribes deal with the Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and HHS, Indian Health Services. Those two agencies are the most prominent when it comes to like treaty trust responsibility or federal trust responsibility. The rest of the federal family needs to have a better understanding, and that's what we worked with before he passed. But telling our stories in diplomacy and action, doing artwork is telling our stories, and telling our stories, in the public arena. Secretary of Commerce Gary Locke, no administrator Jane Luchenko, And this was the first fish fry in the Department of Commerce courtyard in Washington, D.C. under the Obama administration. And so here we have, you know, art, the cedar culture, you know, our national flag, and, you know, government to government at the highest level at the time. So that's in a nutshell. That's all I have to share. I don't want to take too much more time.
Thank you very much. That was amazing, like providing all that context for looking at the resilience of the sovereignty, particularly around like fishing and whaling rights. Are there questions or comments out there?
I have a question about the current whale hunting, which I know has been a bit controversial in the Seattle area. Can you explain just briefly how often do the Makahs still hunt, and how many whales do they take? And are they using traditional technology or modern technology in the hunt?
Good questions. Since the beginning of contact, we adopted modern tools, and we were quick to integrate and adopt, you know, like I'd say even better technology. So once we learned how to use steel, we never went back to the clamshells or the mussel shell harpoons. And we still maintained our, you know, our reverence for the spirit and passing the spirit of the whale. And so there's teachings that, you know, have been translated into English by now. But essentially, Anderson versus Evans was a lawsuit filed by animal rights groups, and they found sympathetic judges in Judge Berzon out of San Francisco, and Judge Gould out of Seattle, and Indian case law with you know, a historical profile of Judge Gould. I believe Gould was a Reagan Republican appointed judge, and he's ruled negatively against tribes whenever he could. And Judge Berzon out of San Francisco was appointed by President Clinton. And in my opinion, you know, killing whales was a philosophical inconvenience to her. And so they manufactured well, what they call sometimes legislation from the bench. They ignored existing laws that would have supported, you know, a more responsible, you know, position of the federal government with respect to the treaty trust responsibility. And so what people fail to understand is that the treaties are actually constitutional law and actually used in international law. So the United States brought proof and evidence of the treaties, the Stevens treaties, to the Treaty of Paris to help negotiate the US-Canada border for Washington State. And the constitutional covenant of the treaties is such that, I don't want to get into a whole bunch of history, but basically the negligence of the US government and public education systems led a lot of people to believe falsely that treaties can be easily worked around. And so what I found in this particular case is that, you know, the extreme right and extreme left sometimes really don't care about sovereignty. We need to focus on, you know, a more holistic understanding and teaching of the environment. I think essentially the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Endangered Species Act, and NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, they all need to be reworked in a sense for a more holistic management of the natural world. And so what we found is that, you know, when, I'm just going to say it not to be racist or anything, but when the white man came, there was an economic driver that was smash and grab. And there was what we call single species exploitation. And so when they came here for halibut, they watched our halibut fishermen, and then they learned where to catch them, and then they took them all. And when the halibut were gone, they moved to Alaska. And so the consequences of that have led to much needed legislation. But what happens is the world changes. And back in the Bolt decision in 1973, there was a lot more salmon, and we were getting less than 50%. Now we're getting less. Now we're getting, or supposed to be getting 50%, but there's a lot less salmon. And the ecosystem's so out of balance now that seals and sea lions are, in my opinion, very educated opinion, they're beyond their carrying capacity. And when we first started with Makah whaling, they estimated the gray whale population back in the late 90s and early 2000s was estimated around 23,000 gray whales. And then our Chukchi native relatives have been seeing that the hunting grounds or the feeding grounds for the gray whales up in the top of the world there, the whales were being much more aggressive. And then we saw a lot of mass strandings of gray whales. And so the prevailing understanding of unbiased biologists was that the gray whales exceeded the carrying capacity of the environment when we started to initiate our public policy interactions to rebuild whaling. And so since then, the Anderson versus Evans case has resulted in another proceeding for an administrative law judge. An ALJ is an administrative judge usually appointed as an arbiter of reviewing the government actions to make a decision. And so my understanding is that the ALJ is still considering the hearing and about to make a recommended decision to the no administrator. So if this process had succeeded in the previous administration with Obama, it would have been Dr. Jane Lubchenco you've seen in the slide. She would have been the no administrator to make the decision, and I know enough of her background that she would very not want to make that decision because she's really tight with the conservation community in California. So unfortunately, Makah whaling is caught between extreme left and extreme right politics, and we're still waiting for the government to make the right decision.
Wow. So much still going on. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, where do you start? It's such a long story.
I know. Incredible.
Hey, could I jump in really quickly? Thanks for the reference, Micah, to the book, The Sea is My Country. I was just looking that up. It's come out pretty recently, 2015 in hardback, and according to this, there's a paperback version that came out in 2018. So it sounds like it should be pretty widely available.
Cool, yeah. Yeah, I went to high school with Josh Reed.
And apparently he's on history faculty at UW, I guess.
Yeah, he is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other final comments before we move on to Joe?
I just got one quick one I think is a little bit relevant. And I'm sorry, Joe, I don't want to take too much more time, but one thing that I did when I was on council is I worked with a late chairman to acknowledge a Spanish fort in the Bay in 1790. And I led an exchange over to Spain and the Museum of the the Museum of the Americas in Madrid. And one of the things that we did over there is I was part of a delegation with Luis Fernando Esteban, who's a consul for Spain. He's recently retired, but he came to Seattle in the 70s when there was a big scare that Boeing was going to shut down, and he was representing Iberia Airlines at the time. But he also grew up as a personal friend of the King of Spain. And so when we were working with this notion of acknowledging the Spanish fort in Nia Bay, there was some bad terms in the way in which the Spanish left. And so it was incumbent upon me and my people that we resolve the hostilities that we still remembered. And so on behalf of the King of Spain, Luis Fernando signed a cessation of hostilities agreement with me on the spot of where the Spanish fort stood. but a Spanish fort site was also the house that my mom lived in to take care of the oldest lady in the village that didn't speak English. So there's kind of a really interesting, family connection to the location itself. But what I ended up doing was the University of Washington opened a study center in Leon, Spain. And in Leon, Spain, they were preparing the 1100th anniversary of the Kingdom of Leon's unification of the Iberian Peninsula that was ultimately, strong enough to push the Moors out of Iberia and bring Spain to what we know it is today. And so the study center in Leon, I gifted a mask of noble friendship in honor of the peace treaty. And I used, I don't have a slide for it right now, but I used the colors of the Spanish flag to paint a chief mask. And it's in the University of Washington Study Center right now in Leon. That's it.
Very cool. Thank you. Showing your, like, it's awesome, like looking at the various ways that you've shown partnership. Definitely like that art piece that you did with the Sister City inspired you to make that piece, and your various work with both these treaties and like that, continuing to work on collaboration between different people. It's very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Micah. And Joe, I will show the two pieces that we have for Nantes that are on display in Nantes. Right here. So, Joe, would you like to speak to this design?
Yeah, no, that is a design I call Power of Three, which is the design itself stems from another design that I did out of 18-inch woodblock print called creator calls it Thunderbirds. And the Thunderbirds in that print come from an old mountain sheephorn rattle that's at the Seattle Art Museum. And so when I did the Power of Three design here, I took the Thunderbird image and then I adapted it. I took off the horn of the Thunderbird up on the top of the head, and then I changed it into an eagle head, when I took off that horn. And then I adapted the colors for the Seattle Seahawks, our American football team that we have here that everybody, super proud of, big fan. And so I kept the eye of the Seahawks. And, for me, the eyes are the that kind of like the center of the soul, the doorway. And so, you kept that eye of the actual Seahawks. So you're keeping the focus on the power of the football team for me. So, that's my unofficial, Seattle Seahawks logo. And, not being the sister city for Seattle, Larry talked about this piece and that strong connection of how some people in Nantes, have the affinity for the Seahawks. And so, that's one of the pieces I was chosen. And, that piece there is on an 18-inch drum. The drum, I've been making drums since 2003, since my first canoe journey in the waters around Puget Sound and British Columbia, Canada. Tribes participate in annual journeys with traditional dugout canoes. I've been a participant for Squaxin Island since 2003. For my first canoe journey, I didn't have my own paddle. I didn't have my own drum. I knew very little about the actual culture of Squaxin Island. And it wasn't until after that something awoke in me where, I started learning how to do traditional pieces. And so drums were one of the first things I learned how to do. And so over the years, I've perfected my technique in making drums. And so, it's more for me about the care and the work that goes into making a drum for me. I've made, probably over 100 drums in my life. And, each one had a special meaning for me, and each one that went out to other people. I'm giving a little bit of my personal history with each drum that I make. So each story each drum has its own story. So I was really honored that I got to have this piece be chosen for this exhibit. And so yeah.
Thank you. And the next one. Oh,
Yep.
sorry. There we go. There's.
Okay. The image on the right side of the screen is the giant Pacific octopus, which we call the devilfish here. I don't know the traditional name for the octopus, but that stems from an encounter I had with an octopus, probably about 10 years ago. No, 7 years ago. And, I make my living underwater. I harvest shellfish with Squaxin Island. And so, I strap on a full face mask, and we have air pumped down to us. So I'm a commercial diver. And I was down at about 70 feet harvesting gooey ducks, and this blob just floated past me, probably about maybe 10 meters away from me. And I look at it, and it's not floating like anything that like seaweed or anything else that would just drift along in the current. It actually had motion to it. It's on its own power, and I noticed that it was an octopus, and that was the first time I'd ever seen one in its natural habitat in the wild. And so that I kind of started talking to my teacher about it. And so she's talking about octopus, and she's talking about she's just sketching a design, and I'm talking about that dive experience, and I'm sketching out my own design. So this is one of the designs that came out of that conversation years ago regarding the Watcher of the Deep. And so that's why I entitled this piece here. This piece, that design came out, I came out with that print in 2018. Right about the same time I was preparing to go to New Zealand for a guided learning trip with my program at Evergreen. And so I had a number of these prints with me, and during my travels, I went down to Christchurch on the South Island, and part of the cultural exchanges that we had, this was for an international artist, architect, and design conference. And one of the cultural exchanges we had was we went to this marae, this community house, on the interior of a bay down in Christchurch. And the name of the house was Feke. And Feke, translated from Maori, means octopus. So, I had one of these prints with me, so I ran into the bus and I grabbed my gear, and I pulled out this print, and I was able to present it to the caretakers of this marae. And it was for me, it was a huge honor to be able to give this piece to this community, to represent that, the ties between indigenous people. They cross time, they cross distance, the language. It all comes down to, for me, it all comes down to the water. The Maoris are a huge canoe society. Coast Salish is a huge canoe society. Squaxin Island is called the people of the water. And so, a lot of what I do, centers around the water. And so for me to take my, what ties my heart to my land or to my area was to carry that to another part of the world, which my ancestors really had no knowledge of. They were on, I'm pretty sure they had very little knowledge of the Maoris down in New Zealand or Aotearoa. But to carry that and to share that with this community house, for me was just absolutely amazing, and it was for me it was just a really remarkable day. And then we go to the pieces here on the left side. You know, for us, you know, here in Squaxin, as for the Makah as well, you know, our living, you know, our life depends on the sea, it depends on the water. And, you know, the health of the water, you know, dictates the health of the people. And, you know, like Micah said, the salmon run here is, you know, being diminished at an abysmal rate, you know, over harvesting and poor water quality, environmental changes, you know, they're just decimating, you know, the life in the water, and it's going to affect us if it already hasn't. But, you know, when I do pieces that involve the spirits of the water, the ancestors from the water, you know, for me, it's always an honor. And, you know, these 4 salmon here, they're representations of king salmon, Chinook salmon. And, you know, when I did this piece here, I was commissioned by a private developer to come up with a design for the side of his building. You know, he's renovating a 9-story tower in downtown Olympia, and you know, he said he wanted an exclamation point, you know, for Olympia. And you know, when I started drawing these salmon here and how they would look on the side of the building, you know, the way these salmon are going to be on the building, this bottom right corner salmon in the circular design, that one is a female salmon. She's going to go on the bottom, or the very lower of the piece, and then the 3 other salmon will be stacked, you know, above the female, and you know, the 3 salmon will be representation of swimming up the Deschutes River here in Olympia, and the bottom one is you know, she's waiting her turn to you know, for the conditions just to be right so she can make her run up the river. And so you know, these salmon here represent really the only species of salmon to run up the Deschutes River here in Olympia is the Chinook salmon. So these are representations of the ancestors of that particular body of water. And you know, I wanted to show my respect for the Chinook salmon, and you know, pray that, you know, that this representation of them coming home up the Deschutes River would help guide more salmon into the river, so that we can continue to you know, take care of the health of the water, take care of the health of the habitat, and take care of the salmon themselves. And so, you know, yeah, and I was lucky enough to work with this a printmaker in New Zealand to come up with a custom color of the 4 salmon. So, you know, this picture really here doesn't really do it justice, because when you look at the actual prints, there's like a shimmer to the color of the salmon, and you know, that's a representation of the actual the physical salmon themselves. You know, when you look at a salmon, it doesn't look flat. You know, it has that shimmer iridescence, and I wanted to capture that especially that metallic look that Chinook have. You know, through the ink that I used. So, you know, it was nice to come up with that color to represent, you know, the actual natural appearance of the salmon. So, and then should we just go ahead and go to my PowerPoint?
Sure. Are there any questions about those works? I guess those 3 works there. Guess not. I think it's really amazing. Like, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Christchurch is out. So that's kind of cool that you went there, and that story with the octopus, that serendipitous situation. That is so cool. Very cool. So
I just wanted to comment with Joe that I just did an octopus woman mask not too long ago. It's cool that you got an octopus in Nantes.
Actually, I'm painting that octopus right now on
oh wow,
on a meter tall canvas.
oh my, that is so cool. Awesome.
So
all right, so yeah, Joe, you can share your PowerPoint whenever you desire. I'll stop sharing mine.
Okay.
And yours is coming through.
Okay, so like I said, I've been a part of my canoe family since 2003. And, I've had the honor of designing logos for the family. And, the image here on the left is our traditional dugout canoe named the Swisselo, which was carved by a man named George Christ. Squaxin is his ancestral name. And we have 7 paddles to represent the 7 traditional waters of Squaxin Island. When the time came for the signing of the treaties, the lower Puget Sound families were all lumped together to form Squaxin Island. So really, when we talk about Squaxin Island as a tribe, it's a confederation of 7 families that inhabited all the water south of what's called the Tacoma Narrows. So, all the waters of southern Puget Sound, of the southern Salish Sea, were inhabited by these 7 families that were incorporated into Squaxin Island. And so to represent the 7 families, I drew those 7 paddles in the canoe. And then in the back is a older style of Thunderbird that I adapted off of an older piece. I believe it was a spindle whirl I studied. And so, the story behind this one is that the Thunderbird, guides and protects our canoes on the water. And, for me, it's always an honor for me to incorporate, these supernatural beings that, represent what I believe in. And it's just this sharing that is just absolutely amazing, that we get to tell these stories of these beings that existed long before man did. And one of the things I've realized, through my study of pieces in museums, is that throughout North America, every indigenous culture had an image of a Thunderbird. From the very north of Inuit territory to the very south. And I haven't researched South America, but I know through the Mexico and through the Central American countries, there's some image of a Thunderbird. And East Coast to West Coast is images of Thunderbirds. So, I always find that just absolutely amazing that we all get to share this one common being in our culture. And we all look to it for guidance, and we all look to it for protection. So that's just the one take I have on Thunderbird here. And then when we look at the image on the right is an otter, swimming through eelgrass. And when I went through Evergreen, I had the opportunity to work with Micah's brother Alex, for several quarters. He was when I started my freshman level courses, Alex was my first teacher there. And so, taking a printmaking class with Alex was just, really just a phenomenal event for me, because, both Alex and Micah have tremendous knowledge of the culture and tremendous knowledge of their craft. And so, talking to Alex about his work with printmaking and his teachers, Joe Federson and Gail Tremblay, 2 people that I absolutely adore and honor and just in awe of, that, Alex got to work with them and he got to share his knowledge of printmaking with me. And so, the process of making a monotype print, with monotype prints, every print you make is going to be unique, whether it's the color of your pieces, whether it's the shape of the images, whether it's the composition, everything's going to be unique. That's what makes it monotype. Everything is going to be unique. You're essentially printing with, or painting with ink, with printing ink. So, the eelgrass here on the bottom, you move it around, you change the coloration. It seems more natural through a series of prints, because I've spent years underwater. I've been harvesting geoducks since 1997. For 23 years, I've been underwater, just observing, the underwater world. And so, I get to watch eelgrass sway in the current. And I've been fortunate enough to see sea otters on the water. I haven't seen one underwater, but every once in a while you'll see them, off in the distance in the water. More commonly, we have river otters, but those stay close to the mouths of rivers, to the mouths of creeks. So, for me, this is, the rare time that we get to see the sea otter in our home. Those are more found on the coast of Washington or coast of Oregon and California. So, and, just to see that otter just, playfully swimming along through the eelgrass. And, yeah, no, that's just, my take on the underwater world. This is another design I came up with for my canoe family. This particular design is called, I cannot remember the name of this one. That is weird. But this is one of the designs on the canoe is an octopus design that was designed by my teacher, Andrew Wilbur-Saigo. This is called Our Journey Together. Because essentially we're all in the same canoe when it comes down to it. So this is her octopus that she drew when I was talking about my encounter with that octopus years ago. And so she gave me permission to redraw it and change up the design for my own hand. Once again, we have our traditional dugout canoe. And then in the back, the blackbird is our raven. He's skippering the canoe. And my family comes from the Raven clan. And, the Raven here has the personification of being a joker or a trickster. So, whenever I'm in the canoe, I'm trying to entertain, my pullers. So I'm trying to keep them interested with stories and jokes and songs. So, even though it looks like the Raven is playing, he's really just kind of trying to motivate the other people in the canoe or the other spirits in the canoe. And so it may look like he's just playing along or singing or whistling or goofing off in the back, but he's really doing a lot of work that you don't see as someone who's never skippered a canoe. And then you got the eagle in the front, in the middle. The middle pullers, they do a lot of the work. Sometimes they help the skipper with the steering. So you have eagle here in the middle playing his drum. And, each drum beat is, in sync with a paddle, with a pull, with, putting your paddle in the water, there's that same beat. So, you got the eagle in the front doing his work and driving the canoe with his beat. And then you got bear in the front, keeping up, the two pullers in the front of the canoe, they're the eyes of the canoe. And, they help steer sometimes through rocks or through, seagrass bed or seaweed beds or through eddies. And so you got bear in the front of the canoe, controlling the canoe with his hand, helping to guide the canoe along. And also bear playing in the water trying to catch fish as well. So that whole story of what's going on in the canoe here is what's shown here in this print. I've worked with carved wood as well as prints and painting. So the top image here is a multimedia piece. Like I said, my work is influenced by the water a lot. And so we have a school of salmon here in a modern net. The up top of the piece, the corks are carved yellow cedar. And so this is more of, paying homage to our tribal fishermen. When I first moved up to Squaxin territory in '96, my cousin, she had a boat and a net that she let me borrow. And so for a couple of years, I was, able to be out on the water and fish for silver salmon or coho. And so, this is my representation or my way to honor, all the fishermen out there. And then on the bottom here, we have a yellow cedar paddle. Yellow cedar used to be really abundant down here in Washington, in our territory, but through over harvesting of natural resources, it's become pretty scarce. So we get most of our yellow cedar comes from Alaska. And this is Alaskan yellow cedar here. This is a traditional style of paddle that we would have. And the image on it is of a lightning serpent, indicative, you can look in the eye. Instead of a traditional eye, it has a lightning eye. Like Micah pointed out, lightning serpents accompany thunderbirds when Thunderbird is hunting. Thunderbird will fly above the water, and he'll see his prey, and he'll send a thunder serpent or lightning serpent down to stun his prey. So when I put that on a paddle, I'm putting the energy of the lightning serpent into the paddle, so that when we're pulling along, we all have that energy to just the energy of the supernatural to keep moving on, to keep pulling. And yeah, so that's acrylic on yellow cedar. The panel on top is a red cedar, Western red cedar, which is abundant still down here in our lands. And this is what I call I call this piece the COVID bowl. I'm really not super adept at carving. My carving skills are very basic. So one of my friends, she was taking down some alder in her yard, and she gave me a couple of chunks. And a lot of that alder I used up to smoke up meat. But this piece here, I cut it up, and I studied some of the bowls in collections in the Seattle Art Museum and the National Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. I studied bowls in the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. on the East Coast. And so I was able to reference the research that I did there into coming up with the COVID bowl. And so this is really just a really basic style of some of the older artifacts that we had here. Through my research, one of the things I found is that it's incredibly hard to find pieces from southern Puget Sound because at the time of exploration and colonization, stories had come down from the north, from Vancouver Island to British Columbia. And when they reached the southern Puget Sound, stories of artifacts being stolen or being traded or being sold, were coming down to us, and we're hearing these stories. And a lot of what we had, a lot of our possessions were our treasures. So, either treasures were buried, and records were lost. We didn't keep records of where we buried our treasures, so those were lost to us. Or some of our treasures were burned. They were given back to the spirit world because we didn't want our treasures being taken away from us. So when I research for southern Puget Sound, I don't get a lot of hits, but I do get a lot of images of bowls. And so when I had the opportunity to go to the East Coast to do this research, I held these bowls that came from our lands, and I got to feel their spirit again, and I got to have them be free from their shells, even if it was just for a day or two. And so, when I had the opportunity to create these bowls, it was in that same vein that, this is, it may just be a simple utilitarian bowl. I don't know if I'm saying that word right, but, just a simple bowl, but, it still has its power and it still has its spirit. And so, it had been years since I tried to carve a bowl. But when I finally finished this piece here, I gave it to the lady who gave me all that alder to work with. And if you look on the ends of the bowls, the 7 notches, once again, to represent the 7 inlets of Squaxin Island. And so this bowl comes from Henderson Inlet here in Puget Sound. And so, I wanted to represent the 7 families in this bowl. So I've since carved another bowl, which is, I call this the Kovitz Series, because this is all, stemming from me not being able to go anywhere and do anything. So, you just get busy doing work, and, I wanted to work on my carving skills. So, these alder pieces were the perfect opportunity for me to get to know my chisels better. And you know, it was just an incredibly fun piece to do, and I look forward to carving more bowls like these. And this last piece here was what I call the guardians of the Salish Sea. You know, Micah mentioned the orcas being the apex predator, and you know, we do have a pod of orcas that inhabit Puget Sound, and you know, like I said, the health of the water is dictated by the health, or is shown through the health of its inhabitants. And you know, there was a couple years ago, there was a young female orca that you know, pushed her dead orca baby through the waters for weeks. And it was so sad and so heartbreaking, you know, to know that, you know, this orca mother couldn't care for her young. And ultimately, you know, the young dead calf fell away and, you know, taken back by the water. And so I wanted to show my respect and my admiration for these guardians with this piece here. And you know, a friend of mine, her mother, you know, absolutely loved watching the orcas in Puget Sound. And so I made her a drum years ago. And because of the virus and me being, you know, stuck here at home, you know, I've had more time to just come up with new designs. So, you know, I wanted to paint a design that I could paint on my friend's drum to represent, you know, her mother. And so, you know, I came up with this orca design. And, you know, it just turned out that for me, it's one of my favorite designs to look at right now. And I painted that on a drum that went up to a gallery in Seattle, but I'll probably paint it on another drum, you know, a personal drum that I can have of my own. So it's just such a fun design to look at, you know, to see the power of the orcas, and you know, how the image draws you to the center, and it's just kind of, this piece just pulls your eye into it. And you know, one of the hallmarks of Coast Salish design is the negative spaces. You know, if you look at the space between the tails of the orca, you know, you have that symmetrical, what's called a trigon. You know, there's a central trigon, you know, in the tails, and then there's a secondary smaller trigon in the indent of the tails. So, you know, that's for me, that's one of the hallmarks of Coast Salish. You know, what separates it from other, you know, Southeast Alaskan, you know, Haida design or Tsimshian or New Chalmers design. You know, that use of the negative space, and you know, you get that use of negative space in the actual orcas themselves. You know, from the space between the mouth to the tail. You know, it kind of has an abstract trigon shape to it. You know, the space between the tail and the fin also has that trigon shape. And so, you know, that's one of the things I'm always careful of, is, you know, when I try to do a design, is, you know, am I using the negative space, you know, in the way that it was meant to be used within our culture. Yeah, I believe that's all I have. So.
Thank you very much. What questions or comments are there?
Hey, Joe, I was thinking about your paddle. One of our canoe songs is Lakcha Lakcha Suwe, and Lakcha Lakcha is lightning. So it's like when you're in the current and the wind, your canoe is traveling with lightning. So cool paddle design, made me think of that. Thank you.
So Jean, you're still muted. You look like you were trying to say something. You need to unmute. Like, we can't hear you, Jean.
I'm muted. Okay, I'm muted. Oh,
You're good now.
I do?
Yep,
You hear me?
we can hear you.
You had to do something here. My question was about the term Acoma. I spent a lot of times with the macaws and also sometime on the rock at Acoma in New Mexico. What's the connection?
I'm Pueblo of Acoma on my mother's side. My mother's family comes from the Red Corn clan. I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is about an hour east of Acoma. And so we still have our family home on the mesa itself. And we have our other family home in one of the villages, which is the village actually called McCarty's. So it's quite a coincidence there. But I have my uncle and my two surviving aunties, three aunties, live on the reservation in New Mexico at Acoma. Numerous cousins. I visit there all the time. My wife comes from an area about 2 hours away from the Pueblo of Acoma. She's Navajo, and her family lives in the Four Corners area of New Mexico. So when we got married, we had the opportunity to celebrate one of the feast days up on the mesa, our September 2nd feast day.
Oh, yes.
Everybody who came to the wedding was invited up to the mesa for this feast. So we opened up our house and fed everybody, had a day of rest, and then my wife and I got married in my traditional homelands, actually, near the Rio Grande River in Albuquerque.
Bring back souvenirs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I've never really had a chance to actually study Acoma design, but my cousins, she's an award-winning pottery maker. My auntie, taught her everything she knew. Her mother taught her about pottery making. So I have pieces that they've made. My mother painted pottery for years until her arthritis in her hands, took that ability away from her. But I have pieces from my mother, from my aunties, from my cousins. I have not a huge collection, but it's a sizable collection of pieces from Acoma. And one of the things I wanted to do after I graduated from Evergreen and after I'm done with this particular project with the salmon here in Olympia, is go to college and get my MFA, my Master's in Fine Arts. And I wanted to incorporate traditional pottery design with traditional Salish weaving. I weave wool as well. And so I kind of want to bring both cultures together in one piece. And the way the Salish weaving is here, it's we use geometric shapes as well. And with that mug that you showed, we have those geometric shapes. So I want to incorporate Acoma design in a similar way with Co-Salish weaving, but it'll still be my designs, my traditional pottery designs or Acoma designs on Salish style weaving.
But I'm very much for explaining that to me. I couldn't realize the connection between the macaws and the rock at Acoma.
So, Joe, I think perhaps you have some hidden influences from that, because I was going to ask you if any of your art did reflect the Acoma background. And I thought on that painting of the 4 salmon, the one in the lower right-hand corner, the female salmon that's curved, that really reminded me a little bit of Pueblo-style bowls, designs on the rims of bowls and in the bottom of bowls.
Huh. I mean, I grew up watching my mother paint pottery, so there may be that latent Acoma design coming through. But like I said, I haven't formally studied anything really. I look at my mom's pieces a lot, and I noticed similarities in the use of geometric shapes. So it might have influenced it like that. But it's good. I'll have to take a look at that again.
That's really interesting. I think there's another coincidence there, Joe, is that I'm a good friend with Amos Pueblo, Roger Frawa, and I joined an organization he helped lead, was called the Flower Hill Institute, and so we've been down for board meetings down there on a few occasions. And one time I had the pleasure to visit him at his native Pueblo. He took me to the governor's house, the governor of that Pueblo, and told me and showed me a cane that was gifted to the Pueblo people by the King of Spain back in the 1600s. And so at the time I was working with Luis Fernando Esteban's son. There was a conference down in New Mexico, and Fernando's son was with me, and we were talking about the Spanish Fort project, and then we thought about doing something because the Pueblos have treaties with the Kingdom of Spain, and there's that Spanish connection with the Makah and the, you know, with the Spanish as well. So I thought that was kind of cool hearing about that and learning more about your Pueblo history. Right.
So I have another question about back to the canoe journeys, which obviously are a really huge part of your life. How many days are those again? I know it lasts for a long, long time, and it sounds like you're the person in the back who has to entertain everybody the whole way.
The canoe journeys, the length of the canoe journey varies from year to year. This year it was supposed to be held. The final destination was supposed to have been in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, on the east coast of Vancouver Island, on the interior. The community was Slanaima, and they were supposed to host at the end of July, but because of the virus, everything had been shut down. And we were planning on being on the water for 2 weeks. And actually, when Makah hosted, it was about the same amount of time on the water. I think we had 16 days on the water to go to Makah. And when the host tribe, you know, gets to potlatching, you know, the end potlatch or the end, you know, celebration is typically, you know, 4 to 6 days. And, you know, depending on the length, you know, some of the northern tribes from like Bella Bella up on the mainland of British Columbia, you know, they'll spend a month on the water and then 4 days celebrating. So they're, you know, away from the community for 35 days. When we went up to Bella Bella, I was gone for a month. So, you know, it all depends on the destination. And, you know, each day, you know, you're going only a certain number of miles from host to host. You know, it's you know, we'll leave depending on the tide or the weather. You know, so, you know, you're going to spend anywhere from like 4 to, you know, maybe 8 to 12 hours on the water. You know, depending on you know, what type of canoe you're in, how many pullers you have. Do you have any relief pullers? Or is there a soft landing, like a break area for lunch? So you're spending, you know, just, you know, hours on the water, and yeah, so, you know, you got to find ways to keep everybody entertained. And you know, fortunately for me, you know, I've got a loud voice, and I've been given permission to carry songs, and so I'll be back there singing songs, you know, singing paddle songs, songs to keep the spirits up. And because of the responsibility of carrying those songs, you know, you're supposed to know where the song comes from and who holds the permission to give that song away. And so I'll explain all of that, you know, to the pullers as well. So, you know, it's an opportunity to teach, you know, my pullers, you know, where the song comes from, you know, the explanation of the song. Are there words in the song, and what do they mean? How do you pronounce those words properly? You know, that's, you know, I'm doing more than a lot of just steering the canoe when I'm back there. And so, and for me, it's always an honor to be in that stern position, because you know, not only do I have the opportunity to teach, but it's a huge responsibility because I got to get everybody home alive every day, and you know, I don't take that lightly. So you know, you know, these people are trusting me, families are trusting me with their loved ones. And so, you know, I want to take that into the stern as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Really interesting. I had no idea that all that was going on. That's marvelous.
It's like a duck on the water. You know, you don't see the work underneath.
Well, I've seen it. I've met my wife on travel journeys, and I understand that skippers really, really strong backbone of the community of the ocean going canoe societies, because I've been to a few skippers meetings, but more as support, not as a skipper. And there's a lot of thought and care that goes into weather conditions, tides, learning how to navigate other people's territories, the protocols of entering somebody else's territory. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, and you gotta, you know, you become a leader, not just of your own canoe, but you become a leader among leaders. It's a big honor being a skipper.
Joe, you alluded to this earlier about being cooped up at this time, and I just wondered if either or both of you would reflect on this very difficult period that we've all been experiencing and how it may already be informing your art going forward. Just curious if that's something you might want to comment on.
Well, I mean, I'm really lucky that I get to have a studio in my backyard. You know, right now I'm in a, you know, 10 by 20 shed that we've drywalled and insulated and ran power to it. So, you know, I get to have my own little space where I'm not at home. Well, I'm at home, but I'm not in my house. You know, I do have a dedicated area to work, and you know, I have a nice big table here that I get to draw on. I've got lots of light, lots of natural light. But you know, it has given me a lot of time to really reflect on you know, what kind of art I want to do, you know, going forward. And you know, there's been a bit of a movement for artists to go into pop art. And so I've had the opportunity to you know, to do some Star Wars themed art. You know, I painted a Darth Vader on a satellite dish, you know, which is something I've wanted to do for years. And now I've had the time. You know, I'm looking right now at 3 satellite dishes I pulled off a friend's roofs. So, you know, I'm going to do more of that. I wanted to do a Godzilla design, you know, for a long time. A friend of mine in Seattle, Jeffrey Verigi, you know, he's huge into nerd culture, and so he's done a stylized Godzilla, and so I'm looking forward to you know, putting that design on a satellite dish as well. You know, so it's just something different to do, a different way to branch out. You know, but to still honor my co-Salish ties, but to honor, you know, the time I live in, and, you know, to honor my influences. And, you know, I grew up watching Godzilla movies on a Saturday morning. So, you know, to watch Godzilla and King Kong, you know, bash up that pagoda, you know, that's what I want to bring out in co-Salish culture. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I've been wanting to do some pop art too. I did Makah stylized Jedi symbol once and brought it down to the Eclipse Festival as a print. I used it as one of the moon designs. It was kind of fun. I've done a couple like Seahawk stuff too. But with the COVID thing, I moved back to Nia Bay more permanently in early February. I moved my carving studio into one of the bedrooms in my late dad's house. That's where I'm at right now. And so then soon after the pandemic really, you know, hit the fan, and my tribe shut down really fast, closed the border and restricted coming and going. So that had a really big impact on a lot of the stuff that I was doing, you know, in this new space. And I got involved with a Seattle Times article with Life Behind the Lockdown. And, you know, at that time too, you know, Nia Bay is such a tourist destination. We always, you know, have people here from, you know, late spring all the way through September. And so having the village just to ourselves was a strange feeling, and it inspired a lot of different thoughts and emotions about our ancestors surviving the smallpox Holocaust that was perpetrated on us 3 years before the treaty. We had 70% of our people drop dead because of an intentional smallpox attack. In fact, where my dad's house is, where I'm staying, is one of the villages that was most devastated. And coincidentally, behind me, actually up the hill, is where the BIA men instituted their attack. And so BIA Hill is what's right behind me here at this village site, but Ada, one of the 5 villages. And I'm pretty well networked with a lot of people. I've got a friend that's a nurse that went to New York to volunteer during that hotspot flare and people dying in New York. He was there. He posted something on Facebook, deep into the raging pandemic in New York City. One of his colleagues, a female nurse, fell ill and died because of the COVID. And so I did a mask in tribute to the medicine people that are at the front lines. And so I did a series of medicine women masks, but this one I dedicated to all of the ones that have fallen. And it was purchased by a Native family as an honor to their own daughter that's a nurse. And then I did a male mask, similar in spirit. I actually painted a stylized white square across the face of a medicine man mask. And actually, it was more like a warrior, and I called that mask Warrior Spirit 2020 because of the year of the pandemic. So, in hindsight, thinking about things too and how the market changed, I was a full-time artist at 9/11 when the Twin Towers were attacked and the planes went in. I had a 2-year-old baby girl. I was watching the planes hit over and over again. And what happened to my art then was I couldn't sell anything over $500. I had to retool my whole game plan about making a living as an artist. And so thinking about the pandemic now, I'm thinking about how do I change gears as an artist who produces something that's more of a luxury for disposable income as opposed to a necessity. And so I've been thinking, I got to get into the seafood business again. I know Joe's got that as kind of a backup too. But we have treaty resources out here that, I want to put some artistic flair to, and, maybe do some artisan type value added products, smoked salmon eggs. What can I do to change and diversify, my ability to provide for my family? So, and then, then utilitarian things like, people might need a, lamp more than they would want a mask. So how can I, change up, different things to be more of a necessity as opposed to a luxury, or maybe a luxurious necessity like this one behind me, that lampshade. Well, coincidentally, while I was listening, I was also keeping busy with putting fabric on the backside. But I'm getting ready to go to Olympia. I've got a house down there and 2 daughters working at a shellfish farm, and I've got to get rolling. I didn't expect to be this long. I know partly I'm long-winded, but I appreciate your time and attention. And good to get to know you, Joe. There's some other things I'd like to talk with you about sometime soon. I brought up your name with another artist about a possible collaboration in downtown Olympia, so maybe we can talk about that later.
Yes, well, thank you both, Micah and Joe, for taking the time, not only for sharing your work with everybody in Nantes right now, but for taking the time to, you definitely did far more than what we expected in terms of sharing your history and more of your art, which is just phenomenal. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to add my thanks as well, and just to say that as we changed the focus of this exhibit with the COVID and realized that we couldn't do the in-person project that we had planned, we are still planning next year to do the real thing, and looking forward to working with you guys then and doing some more great art. Thank you very much.
Yeah, because of the COVID impact, I actually planned on coming over to France. One of my friends I met on Canoe Journey, she runs a native film festival in Nantes. A woman named Sophie Girard.
That's right. I had forgotten. Larry, I think, told me about that. And yes, we know people who know that film festival and those people. So yes, that would be, maybe we can do something collaboratively with that as well next year. That would be fabulous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she just actually sent me a picture this morning of her in front of the museum,
Oh, that's so
in
cool.
front of the
Yes.
Seahawks
All right.
game. So I was really,
That's awesome.
that was great to see, and I really miss seeing her. It'll be fun to have an
Yeah.
opportunity to go to.
That
go to
sounds
France.
great.
I've never been to France before, so
That's cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to game plan some kind of a, cultural exchange. I think Joe and I could really come up with some pretty amazing ideas. I'd like to even bring a salmon bake to the sister city, and one of the important things we'd need from our friends on the Nantes side is when we do salmon bakes out here, it's always best to do it with driftwood. So we'd have to get some driftwood from by the mouth of the river. Probably tastes better, but yeah, I think it'd be cool. The film festival aspect is really cool too. I think that would be another way to really, celebrate the relationship. And I know that the museum director at Squamish would like to be involved. So I think we could probably come up with a nice, tight knit, group. With me and Joe and a few others, we can really pull off a really good, good fellowship event.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely wonderful. And I know that our colleagues in Nantes are going to start talking about next year's celebrations. They're going to meet, I think, in September, because of course everyone in France is on vacation right now for the month of August.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, which is very hard to get a hold of people in France right now. But yes, I'm going to start planning things fairly soon. So that sounds really great. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to spending some time in France and sharing my songs with you guys. So
Marvelous.
Awesome.
Well, I guess we better let you guys go. Thank you so much again. We started with a couple of meetings over coffee, and who knew we'd end up having coffee in this way? But the way that this has come together under extraordinary circumstances just still blows my mind. So thank you so much. And yeah, just looking forward to our continuing work together.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks. It was excellent.
Ooh, nice. I've been there.
alrighty, so we just say a few words in my traditional language. Is a hot squat, Slatsabut, Sulav Sabitzi Dudchud. Go with yourselves in a good way, and be safe in your travels.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.